The purpose of World War II is not a cheerful story. The only cheerful notes come from Italy's participation. Whatever one may think of Mussolini, Galeazzo Ciano, etc., the only note of comedy during those quite dramatic weeks was provided by them, as you will see. So, how did World War II break out? It has been written that in reality World War II broke out in 1919 when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, which ended World War I, and ended World War I, creating a multitude of dissatisfaction and frustration. Do you remember that even Italy, which had Trento and Trieste, consumed its Tyrol, yet was not satisfied? In fact, we used to say it was a mutilated victory. Even the victorious Italy eventually sank almost into civil war and dictatorship as a consequence of that war that ended badly. Imagine the countries that lost. Germany, which lost, emerged from World War I, from the Treaty of Versailles, frustrated, feeling that it had suffered an injustice. What injustice? Well, for starters, Germany had to cede territories to a new country. The Treaty of Versailles created many new states, including Poland, and Germany had to cede a large piece of territory inhabited by Germans to Poland, which led to unmanageable situations. There was a city, today it means nothing to anyone, Gdansk in Poland. We haven't heard much about it since the times of Lech Wałęsa, but back then it was widely discussed. Danzig, a major port and an important German city, is located on the border between the new Poland and Germany. Both claim it. The winners of the Treaty of Versailles decide, well, let's make it a free city, independent, neither German nor Polish. The city of Danzig is entirely inhabited by Germans who would like to be part of Germany, but they are not allowed to. And in Germany, an opinion movement immediately begins, somewhat comparable to what was happening before the war in Italy. Trento, Trieste, irredentism, the separated brothers. Germany is fighting. Danzig is German, and they didn't give it to us. It's a shame, and we will have to address it one day. But then there are other problems that arose from the end of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was dissolved, and many new states were born, such as Austria, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. With many issues, Austria is small and is entirely inhabited by Germans. The majority of them would have liked, well, since it ended the way it did, to become part of Germany. We are Germans too in Austria. But the winners did not want that. Austria must be independent. And then Czechoslovakia is the state of the Czechs and Slovaks. But in those regions, at the time of the Austrian Empire, there were a lot of Germans, that is, Austrian citizens of German language. Now they find themselves as Czechoslovak citizens. But back then they did not feel Czechoslovak. So there is this set of problems created by the Treaty of Versailles, which are also understandable issues in themselves. They are largely problems of minorities abroad. Tonight I will have to talk for a while about the remote causes of World War II. I would have liked to tell you, very well, we are at August 10, 1939. This is happening. We will do it. But first we need to talk a bit about these remote causes, because otherwise we won't understand anything. And so the remote causes are these that I have mentioned. A Germany that emerges frustrated with a series of claims towards Poland for Danzig, towards Austria because the Austrians are all Germans, and it is not understood why they should not be part of Germany, towards Czechoslovakia for the Germans living there who feel discriminated against. In 1933, the Nazis won the elections in Germany, and Hitler came to power. And Hitler comes to power with a program that includes many nice things, but the thing that the Germans perhaps feel the most is we must revise the Treaty of Versailles. We must revise the Europe that emerged from the Treaty of Versailles. It is an unjust Europe. It is an inequitable treaty. Germany has suffered, and it is not fair. We need to revisit this and change the borders. Here is the story of how World War II broke out. And ultimately, it is the story of a double illusion. One is the illusion of the great democratic powers, England and France. The illusion is that some concessions could have been made to Hitler, because after all, Hitler was right about certain things. The illusion is that one could say, okay, let's negotiate. Let's find an agreement, dance, calm down, without causing major upheavals. An illusion, as we will see. The other illusion is Hitler's belief that it is possible to reclaim everything, and even more, and to transform Germany once again into the great power of Europe without anyone seriously opposing it. The illusion of democracies, the illusion of Western democracies, France and England. There comes a moment when the fact that they are deluding themselves becomes quite evident. Here is our story for tonight. In the end, I decided to start it on this day. November 19th, 1937. 1937. Less than 2 years remain until the outbreak of World War II. We know it, but they did not. On November 19th, 1937, the British Foreign Minister, Lord Halifax, goes to Berlin. He meets Hitler. And in Berlin, the English minister, Lord Halifax, expresses sympathy for the German claims. Because in England, there is now a generation that says, yes, after all, we exaggerated at Versailles. We imposed unfair things on Germany. And it is understandable that the Germans are asking for revisions. Halifax tells Hitler that England understands your claims towards Poland, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. And over time, changes are also possible, says Lord Halifax in Berlin, as long as they are made peacefully and without causing upheaval. Lord Halifax also tells Hitler another thing. Germany is the bulwark of Europe against Bolshevism. Because we must not forget, in order to understand how they think in those years, that there is also this other thing in Europe to the east. There is an elephant in the room that is pretended not to exist, and it is talked about as little as possible. The Soviet Union. There is the Soviet Union where, in 1937, Stalin is now in power. We know that Stalin has shelved the world revolution, but they do not know it. For them, the Soviet Union is still a country, not just of communists, but of Bolsheviks and extremely dangerous revolutionaries. It is a country to be kept at a distance. Therefore, Germany under Herr Hitler, as the English diplomats say in their reports, they always refer to him as Herr Hitler. Germany under Herr Hitler is all in all. With its fierce anti-communism, with all those concentration camps where it has imprisoned German communists, well, all in all, it is a useful country. And so it is in England, and so it is in France. In France, where unlike in England, there is a strong communist party, there is a strong socialist party, and there is a left-wing government, the Popular Front. Today we have forgotten it, but at the time the Front Populaire, unlike Holland, created enormous illusions and enormous fears in France. And in France, there is an industrial ruling class, generals, and the clergy. In the face of a communist government, the slogan of the French ruling classes at that time was, better the Nazis, much better, better Hitler than Stalin. Thus, Hitler perceives that there is an atmosphere in which things can be hoped for, things can be done, one just needs to wait for the right opportunity. There has been much debate about whether Hitler planned everything from the very beginning, having precise plans that led to the invasion of Poland. Do you know Woody Allen? When I hear Wagner, I don't know why I immediately feel like invading Poland. Well, the invasion of Poland is just the last act. There has been much discussion. Hitler had already decided everything from the very beginning. Perhaps not. In the 1960s, a famous book was published by an English historian, Alan Taylor, who states that, after all, Hitler, as much of a criminal as he was, wanted normal things in foreign policy. Everyone wanted their country to be great and powerful. Hitler also wanted it and was waiting for the right opportunities, sensing the air. The air was favorable, waiting for opportunities, and also to create the opportunities for it. Taylor didn't know this well. The documents that emerged later show it. Hitler created the opportunities. It starts with Austria. Austria is a German-speaking country, and therefore there is a Nazi party in Austria that desires annexation to Germany and takes orders from Hitler. At one point, Hitler gives the green light to the Nazis in Austria to create agitation, attacks, terrorism, disorder, and political assassinations. Finally, at a certain moment, it is March 1938, 4 months have passed since Lord Halifax's visit to Berlin, when he told Hitler, after all, one can understand your reasons. 4 months go by. In Vienna, the Austrian Nazi Party stages a coup and invites German troops to enter Austria to ensure security. On March 12, 1938, German troops enter Austria. Sidi and the Anschluss, as it was called, the annexation. It is said that the German army at that time was so unprepared for war that 70% of the military vehicles entering Austria broke down before reaching Vienna. But abroad, no one reacts. In Austria, there is popular enthusiasm, and a plebiscite is held that approves the annexation to Nazi Germany by 99%. The Cardinal of Vienna, Initzer, declares that Austrian Catholics must thank the Lord and obey the new government, which has freed us from the communist threat. And abroad, no one bats an eye. In England, the Times of London writes, but in the end, it's a bit like what we did 2 centuries ago when Scotland joined England. These are quite normal things. The people wanted it. Hitler takes note. He has annexed Austria, and no one has reacted. A few days pass, but really, just a few days, still in that March of 1938, Hitler summons the leader of the Czechoslovak Nazis, because there is also a Nazi party among the German minority in Czechoslovakia. They are called that, I never remember why, but the Germans in Czechoslovakia are called the Sudeten. Among the Germans in Czechoslovakia, there is a Nazi party that takes orders from Hitler. And in March 1938, Hitler initiates, starting with street violence, agitation, and terrorism. Czechoslovakia begins to sink into chaos. The German press starts a heavy campaign. The Germans in Czechoslovakia are oppressed. I am a discriminated, oppressed minority. The Czechoslovak police, criminal, arrest, violate, torture. The Germans in Czechoslovakia suffer. It cannot be endured. The English ambassadors in Berlin and Prague, following instructions from their government, say that after all, the Germans are not entirely wrong. One can understand they repeat that the German claims are fundamentally justified and that it is the Czechoslovak government that should try to accommodate what the Germans are asking for. They certainly don't want to spark another war, do they? So the Czechoslovak government would do better to make some concessions. There is only one country that at that moment, when the Nazis in Czechoslovakia start the same game they played in Austria, takes a public stance and says that all powers should come to an agreement to guarantee Czechoslovakia. It is the Soviet Union. And of course, no one is listening to it because the Soviet Union is the Bolshevik communist country. It is out of the game. The English ambassador in Moscow during those weeks sends a report to London in which he concludes that Russia should be considered outside of European politics. We can pretend that Russia does not exist. They still struggle to acknowledge how the world is changing. They continue to talk about European politics as if it were still England, France. And no, the United States are not there. Japan, the Union. Nothing. European politics still prevail, and Russia does not count. Months go by with Czechoslovakia in chaos, and the German press relentlessly focusing on the suffering of the Sudeten Germans. It is England and France that are pressing the Prague government, saying, make some concessions. Finally, September arrives. The situation is so dire that the English government and the French government decide that the Czechoslovaks must be forced to make concessions to Hitler. We need to come up with something. We should invent a conference, what would today be called a negotiation table. At that time, they had not yet invented the table or the summit. They say a conference should be held. How do we convince Hitler to accept a negotiation table? We ask Mussolini, after all, they are friends. The English and the French turn to Mussolini and essentially say to him, to summarize, listen a bit to Hitler if he is willing to ensure that we all meet and agree to address the German demands regarding Czechoslovakia. Hitler agrees. On September 29th, 1938, there is that page which has since been lamented as one of the low points of European politics, even though at least two of the four protagonists were acting in good faith. The Munich Conference. In Munich, Bavaria, Hitler, Mussolini, the British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, and the French Prime Minister, Daladier meet. At least Chamberlain and Daladier are acting in good faith. On this, it is hard to have doubts. They have a nightmare, like the entire generation that witnessed World War I, like the entire generation that witnessed the slaughter of World War I, the politicians of those years, when faced with a crisis, have only one thing in mind: everything, but not a new war. Never again a war at any cost. Or if you prefer, peace at any cost. What is the cost anyway? Well, if Czechoslovakia has to cede a piece of territory to Germany, so be it. Better this. The Munich Conference involves England, France, Italy, and Germany meeting to decide which part of Czechoslovakia will be ceded to Germany. The Czechoslovaks are waiting outside the door to find out what is decided. And the Munich Conference decides the entire area populated by Germans and Sudeten Germans is ceded to Germany. Hitler takes note. Not only did they not hinder me, they even helped me. Take a piece of Czechoslovakia. And here, how can I put it? I just said it. I don't know. It's difficult to talk about because on one hand, one might say, as has been said for 50 years, what a tragedy of politicians at that level. But those were politicians, so to speak, of the highest level who did not understand what was happening and were acting in good faith. Chamberlain returns to London and he has been mocked ever since. To this day, for this return to London from Munich, Chamberlain returns to London. Already while descending the airplane steps, he waves the sheet with the agreements. You see, there are photographers, the crowd all around. Chamberlain waves the paper and speaks to the crowd. I will translate it directly for you. Chamberlain's speech to the crowd that first day, stepping off the plane from Munich. The resolution of the Czechoslovak problem, which we have now achieved, is, in my opinion, just the beginning of a broader settlement in which all of Europe can find peace. We are 11 months before the outbreak of World War II. Let's remember that. Chamberlain says, "This morning I had another meeting with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler, and here is the treaty that bears his signature and mine. We consider the treaty signed last night as a symbol of the desire of our two peoples to never go to war against each other again. My dear friends, The British Prime Minister has returned from Germany bringing peace with honor. I believe this is peace for our time. Go home and have a nice, peaceful sleep. This is Chamberlain's speech to the crowd in London, returning from Munich. Chamberlain's policy has a specific name that later became a dirty word in the jargon of English politics, which we will revisit tomorrow evening when discussing Mrs. Thatcher. Appeasement, pacification, peace at any cost. And the appeasement today is indeed shocking. They did not realize it. No, they did not realize it. The tragic irony of this is that they were willing to do anything to prevent the war from breaking out. It is the result that caused it to erupt. Well understood, Hitler was skilled. Hitler was very adept at manipulating and deceiving his interlocutors. In Munich, Hitler tells Chamberlain, listen to this. It seems he is reporting this to Chamberlain. He says, I spoke with Hitler. Speaking with great sincerity, Hitler told me that this was the last of his territorial ambitions in Europe. And Hitler said it. He was so sincere. So, sleep soundly. But Chamberlain and Daladier are not the only ones who believe. Besides Mussolini, who also believes it, even Poland believes it. Let us remember, Poland will be the victim when the war breaks out. Poland, when the partition of Czechoslovakia was decided in Munich, took advantage of the situation and also took a piece of Czechoslovakia. Poland is a militaristic country, governed by colonels, a half-democracy, authoritarian, fiercely nationalist, and extremely anti-communist. At that moment, the Poles are convinced that they can befriend Hitler. After all, we are all anti-communists. Who is more anti-communist than Hitler? We Poles, even more so. So the Poles in those months, late 1938, early 1939, believe they are friends with Hitler. And Hitler, on January 30th, 1939, 7 months before the outbreak of World War II, said in the Reichstag, the German parliament, the friendship between Germany and Poland is one of the reassuring factors in the political life of Europe. The Polish foreign minister Beck goes to Berlin at the end of January 1939, the year of meetings with Hitler, during which Beck does not hide that Poland would certainly like to expand towards the Soviet Union and take a piece of Ukraine. There are Polish minorities there, and in the future, it could also be discussed. Meanwhile, while these nice speeches are being made, January, February, March of 1939, Czechoslovakia is falling apart. It lost all the areas inhabited by Germans, it lost most of its industries, and it lost its border fortifications. At this point, Slovakia wants to become independent. It's an old story, you know. Then it happened. Currently, it is independent. It has separated. Czechoslovakia is sinking, about to be invaded by Hungary. At a certain point, Hitler decides to eliminate the problem. On March 14, 1939, Hitler orders the Czechoslovak president, Hacha, to come and speak with him in Berlin. The Czechoslovak president complies. He arrives in Berlin, and at dawn on March 15th, Hitler informs him that the German army is about to enter Czechoslovakia to maintain order, and that the Czechoslovak president must sign a document stating that he requested it. Otherwise, Prague will be razed to the ground by the Luftwaffe. President Raja first suffers a heart attack, and then, with the doctors keeping him awake, signs the request for German intervention. On March 15th, the Germans invade Czechoslovakia. No one intervenes in the world. Hitler takes note. Once again, no one has intervened. You will say it was about time. Chamberlain is starting to think that perhaps he cannot trust Hitler after all. 2 days later, Chamberlain speaks to the House of Commons, saying on March 17, 1939, I will translate Chamberlain's speech, in which he evidently says things he really does not want to say. You can feel it. It's a syntax. Chamberlain says, But this question inevitably comes to mind. But if it is so easy to find good reasons to ignore guarantees given so solemnly and repeatedly, then what trust can we place in other guarantees that will come from the same side? Is this the final attack against a small state, or will it be followed by others? Isn't this a step towards an attempt to dominate the world by force? Chamberlain clearly hopes that he will be told, no, just relax. No. However, doubt begins to arise. The counterproof comes immediately. The Germans invaded Czechoslovakia on March 15th. 10 days later, on March 26th, Hitler presents the Polish government with a request to annex the free city of Danzig. The Poles refuse. Hitler speaks to the Reichstag at the end of April 1939. 3 months earlier, in the same place, Hitler said that the friendship between Germany and Poland is one of the reassuring foundations of European politics. 3 months later, the issue of Danzig is perhaps the most painful problem for Germany. I thought that his peaceful solution would help to definitively ease the tension in Europe. The Polish government has rejected my offer. I am very sorry about this incomprehensible attitude of the Polish government. From that moment on, conflicts, incidents, and shootings begin on the border between Danzig and Poland. In Danzig, Nazi militias are forming, and outside there is the Polish customs, with incidents occurring every day. But this time, the English government and the French government are starting to think that perhaps it is time to do something. What England and France proposed to the Poles to negotiate a treaty of alliance. In fact, Chamberlain goes so far as to officially guarantee that even though the treaty has not yet been signed, if Poland were to be attacked by someone, who knows who, but if it were attacked by someone, England and France are ready to defend Poland. Keep in mind, today, in hindsight, one might say it was about time. What else do you want to do? But at the time, it was extremely difficult to make the public digest this. At the time, public opinion in England and France said, we should go to war for Danzig. Headlines appeared in the newspapers, to die for Danzig. No. However, the French government and the British government, undaunted, having discovered that perhaps Hitler cannot be trusted, did something unprecedented in April-May 1939. They begin to see if some form of agreement can be made with the Soviet Union. And they begin a negotiation that will last many months to see if a military defense agreement can be made in case there is a war. The story of this negotiation is a sad and depressing one, because one might think, well, maybe they should have made this agreement. Instead, it is clear that no one really wants to do it. Everyone is afraid of the men from the other side. What is seen is a fact that seems objective, because it is based on the telegrams that are sent and the responses. Every time England and France make a proposal to the Russians respond the next day.
Then weeks go by, weeks, and finally the English and the French take the next step. The Russians respond the next day, and it continues like this, with this negotiation dragging on. But in the meantime, Stalin takes note. They are asking me to negotiate, but do they believe it? Or do they want to draw me in, and then, at the right moment, leave me to deal with Germany? Stalin takes note and decides that he cannot take risks. He is negotiating a military agreement with England and France, but the English and the French seem very lukewarm. Stalin informs the Germans that even though their countries are enemies, one is communist and the other is not, they still have commercial interests. Perhaps opening negotiations for a trade agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union could also be a good idea. The Germans are on board. And so begins this situation that lasts throughout the summer. Stalin, without anyone knowing, is simultaneously negotiating with England and France at one table and with Germany at another, waiting to see what happens. And Italy is very friendly with Nazi Germany. On May 22nd, 1939, they signed the Steel Pact, amid the enthusiasm of the press. Unfailing friendship between our two peoples. But in reality, Mussolini is worried. He is worried because the Nazis have assured him that they do not want to go to war for the moment. But he is starting to become less certain, and the first thing we need to have very clear, which is not always stated so clearly, even though it is well known and documented, is why Mussolini is not so sure. Because Italy at that moment is completely devoid of resources. Italy fought the war in Ethiopia and participated in the war in Spain, intervening alongside Franco. Everything went well. The war in Ethiopia is a triumph, and things went quite well in Spain too. But wars cost terrifying amounts. The war in Ethiopia and the war in Spain mean that there is a gaping hole in the Italian budget. There is no money left for anything, especially not for modern weapons. Now, it so happens that in these last years, since everyone has understood the prevailing atmosphere, all countries are experimenting with new weapons. In all countries, they are putting into production new concept fighters, the Spitfire, and new tanks. The armaments that were adequate 2 or 3 years ago are aging rapidly. The only country that does not have the money to do it is Italy. Mussolini knows this, even if he occasionally prefers to forget it. But at that moment in the summer of 1939, he has a concern that the Germans might think of going to war. At the beginning of August, Ciano writes in his diary, Galeazzo Ciano, the foreign minister, son-in-law of Mussolini, who will be executed 5 years later after the Verona trial, but that is another story. At the beginning of August, Ciano, our foreign minister, notes in his diary, the time has come to see how things stand. The game is too big. Therefore, Ciano flies to Germany. On August 11th, he meets with his counterpart, the German foreign minister, von Ribbentrop. Ciano is sent by Ribbentrop with the task of explaining to him that waging a war at that moment would be madness. It must absolutely not be done. Ciano asks Ribbentrop, "But all this story you are raising about Poland, what is it that you want? Do you want Danzig?" Ribbentrop replies, "No longer. We want war." I am at a reception. Everyone is there with glasses of champagne in hand. Ciano is itching to tell his collaborators what Ribbentrop has just told him, but they are at the reception. All these things are later written down by Ciano in his diary. He finally passes by one of his collaborators, Ciano, and whispers in his ear, "We're in for a fight." After that, Ciano speaks again with Ribbentrop, and Ribbentrop tells him, "Yes, we will go to war with Poland. It is now decided. We will crush Poland." And he says, "But what about England, France?" And Ribbentrop tells him, "You'll see, they won't intervene." And the bet, as in 1914, for those of you who were there last night, is that they will not intervene, except that this time you know that history repeats itself, first as tragedy and then as farce. This time they are really making the bet. In the sense that Ribbentrop says to Ciano, "Come on, let's bet that they won't intervene. If I win, you have to give me a nice Italian Renaissance painting. If you win, I'll give you a collection of ancient German weapons, but you'll see, I will win, they won't intervene, we will go to war, and it won't become a world war because France and England won't dare to intervene." The gala dinner ends, the reception ends, the toasts, everything. Ciano returns to the hotel with his other collaborators. He is burning with the desire to tell them everything. He is in the hotel, and he begins to doubt that perhaps the Germans have placed microphones in the room. Then they close themselves in the bathroom, and locked in the bathroom, Ciano tells his collaborators, that the Germans have now decided to go to war. And here begins the countdown. August 12th, the day after Ciano's interview with Ribbentrop, Saturday, August 12th. Oh, it's Ferragosto. This war, like the first, breaks out in the middle of summer. At that time, there are not yet many holidays, but there are some. On Ferragosto, people go away. On Saturday, August 12th, for example, Milan empties out. 500,000 people take the train to go to the sea. On the same day, the Franco-English delegation arrives in Moscow, finally sending a delegation to negotiate a treaty after months of discussions. The Soviets are very disappointed. The delegation consists of a French general and an English admiral, second-rate figures. The Russians ask them, "Do you have full powers to sign a treaty?" This thing stops me for a second. This matter of full powers is extremely important for understanding the diplomatic exchanges of this era, in which, for goodness sake, there is the telephone, there is the telegraph, there is the airplane, but then having someone on the spot who can sign is something that everyone considers fundamental. The Soviets ask, "You have come to negotiate very well. There is urgency. You have full powers." And the French general and the English admiral respond, "No. You tell us, and we will report." The Soviets are very disappointed. On the same day, the Soviet government sends an invitation to Berlin. It would be good for Ribbentrop to come to Moscow, because we have things to discuss. Sunday, August 13th. Full summer vacation, the film festival in Venice. Maria Bellonci wins the Viareggio Prize with Lucrezia Borgia. On that same day, Hitler calls Mussolini, "It is just as Ciano told you, we will go to war against Poland. At the first incident, we attack. Not only that," Hitler explains, "it is mid-August. My generals have calculated that it will take a month and a half, 6 weeks at most, to defeat Poland." Now, by mid-October, autumn arrives. In Poland, the roads and airports become unusable due to the mud. Therefore, we must finish by mid-October. We need a month and a half. So we will attack by the end of August. Mussolini and the others in Italy are astonished. Ciano notes in his diary, "They have deceived and lied to us." On Monday, August 14th, in a vacation atmosphere, there is the Salzburg Festival. Hitler, who is in the mountains, goes to the Salzburg Festival, the abduction from the Seraglio by Mozart. In Moscow, the Russians meet with the Anglo-French delegation and lay their cards on the table. Do we want to make an agreement to defend Poland? All right. However, we want the guarantee that it is taken seriously, that the Poles will allow Russian troops to enter Polish territory if there is war. Are they acting in good faith or in bad faith? Are they already thinking of devouring Poland? Or do they seriously believe that if a war must be fought, it should be fought seriously? It's unclear. In the meantime, they say this. What do the English admiral and the French general respond? "It is not our responsibility. We must report. We will report to Paris and London. We will see." On that same Monday, August 14th, Ribbentrop decides that the Russians' idea of him going to Moscow is a good one. He will go. Tuesday, August 15th, Ferragosto. The French general wrote to Paris that the Russians want, in order to sign the agreement, the guarantee that the Poles will allow them to enter in case of war. It is necessary to ask the Poles. The French Foreign Minister Bonnet is seeking the Polish ambassador. Where do you think the Polish ambassador is on Ferragosto? At the sea. And they make him return to Paris. They tell him to grant passage to the Russians in case of war against Germany. The ambassador says he has to ask Warsaw, but in my opinion, they will say no. Because we are even more afraid of the Russians than of the Germans. The French Minister Bonnet warns the Polish ambassador, "Look, we have information that Hitler has declared he will liquidate Poland in 3 weeks. The Polish ambassador responds, "This is important to understand the climate there and what this Polish regime was like." The Polish ambassador responds, "It will be Poland that invades Germany from the very first days." On Wednesday, August 16th, Ribbentrop writes to Moscow, "I am coming." It is the first time they have put in writing that he will make this trip to sign a treaty with the Soviets. In Berlin, the Germans begin to worry about one thing. Those of you who were there last night will forgive me. History sometimes repeats itself. The Germans ask themselves, and what will England do? Therefore, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they summon the English ambassador and say to him, "But don't you support Poland? Can't you see how crazy these Poles are with their provocations? The German minority in Poland is oppressed. It's all the fault of the Poles who are not reasonable people. But you English wouldn't be willing to help madmen, would you?" The English ambassador responds that if the Germans have this idea, they are greatly mistaken, that they have understood nothing of the English mentality, and that there is no doubt that if Poland is attacked, England will help her. On Thursday, August 17th, incidents, shootings, and border violations multiply along the border between Germany and Poland. The German press unleashes a campaign. Remember Czechoslovakia the year before. The German press unleashes a campaign. Polish terror against the German minority. Arrests. Murders. The response from Ribbentrop arrives in Moscow. "I am willing to come to sign an agreement." Friday, August 18th. As you know, Mussolini and Ciano are terrified, because Italy is not ready to go to war. But the official line, that is dictated to the Italian press, is obviously quite different. "We have made the Steel Pact. The Italian press has specific orders. In this crisis, the Germans are right. Therefore, I will read you some headlines from Corriere della Sera, dated August 18th. The tragic responsibilities of the democracies that unleashed and supported Polish arrogance. Fascist militias, which have unleashed and supported Polish arrogance, have unleashed and supported the unwavering firmness of the Axis against the warmongering, cloaked in hypocrisy, of the encirclers. Where the encirclers are precisely the demo-Pluto-judocracies of France, England, and the Soviet Union that besiege the peoples. Well, you don't know, in short, we know this story in Italy. On that same Friday, August 18th, the Polish government must decide whether to form an alliance with the Soviet Union, but allowing the passage of Soviet troops. The Polish government says no. "We have no military agreements with the Soviet Union and do not wish to have any." There is also a famous comment which later became proverbial from a Polish general who declares, "With the Germans we risk losing our freedom. With the Russians we lose our soul." Therefore, no agreement. On Saturday, August 19th, news arrives in Moscow that the Poles do not want an agreement with Russia. Therefore, the negotiation stalls. The Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov writes to Berlin saying, "At this point, let Ribbentrop come. Do we want to meet on the 26th or the 27th? On Sunday, August 20th, a telegram from Hitler to Stalin. Keep in mind that this is the first time in history that a Western head of government writes personally to the head of the Soviet government. Until that moment, the Soviet Union was like a country of lepers, and people only spoke about them indirectly and under the table. The first telegram from a Western leader to Stalin is from Hitler, who on August 20th tells him, "I am glad you have agreed to meet Ribbentrop, but why on the 26th to 27th? Let's do it sooner. Let's do it on the 27th. Let's do it on the 22nd or the 23rd. Monday, August 24th. Mussolini and Ciano are racking their brains to find a way to avoid war. He thinks of doing like last year, a nice conference in Munich, an international conference, where everyone comes to an agreement. Therefore, they call Berlin to speak with Foreign Minister von Ribbentrop and propose this nice idea. From the diary, they say, Ribbentrop is unavailable. Finally, in the afternoon, Ribbentrop responds and says, "I cannot discuss these matters now. I am waiting for an important message from Moscow." On that day, indeed on August 21st, Stalin receives Hitler's telegram at 3 in the afternoon, and at 5 in the afternoon he replies, "Of course, let's do it sooner. Ribbentrop can come to Moscow the day after tomorrow, on the 23rd, and we will sign a non-aggression pact between Germany and the Soviet Union." Oh, let's stop on this matter. It's a crucial decision, one of those that strongly contributed to what happened. It's an absolutely unexpected and shocking decision. We need to be very clear about this because, well, I'll share my opinion. Some may disagree, but for many years, we have been brainwashed into believing that all totalitarian regimes are the same, that Stalin's Soviet Union and Hitler's Germany were the same thing, and so their agreement also seems less strange. The reality is that, for the agent of that time, it is an immense shock because Nazi Germany and the Communist Soviet Union appear as the two most opposed and enemy countries that exist, and they are. It is a testament to the extraordinary cynicism, cunning, and coldness of both the Nazis and Stalin and his group that they make this agreement, which leaves the world astonished. Stalin has decided that the English and the French are too soft. They don't want the agreement, so I will make it with the Nazis, to their face, because I need to be sure. I want to add a small thing. This is something that few people know, and perhaps many of you do not know it either. It's a small piece of the context from those days, when Stalin decides that since things are going very badly, as Ciano says, we are in a tough spot. Stalin decides that he absolutely needs security, even at the cost of making a pact with the devil, knowing that he won't keep the pact later. But for the moment, it is necessary. What is the small piece of context that at the time no one knew, and even today few remember? In those same days, the Soviet Union is fighting a secret and undeclared war with Japan in Mongolia. In Mongolia, which is a communist republic allied with the Soviets and borders the Japanese-occupied Chinese Manchukuo, a full-scale war is underway in the summer of 1939, involving entire army corps, a war that will ultimately result in 70,000 dead and wounded, but that the two governments have agreed not to reveal to the world, and the world does not learn anything. Imagine the borders between Mongolia and Manchuria. It is a full-scale war because the Japanese are crossing into Mongolia from China, and the Mongolians are asking the Soviets for help. The Soviets come in. By the way, the war is overwhelmingly won by the Soviets, who are led by a general who will later become famous, Zhukov, who will also reach Berlin in 6 years. Zhukov defeats the Japanese, and this is happening during those days. Zhukov's attack begins on August 20th. On the 21st, with the battle ongoing, Stalin decides to make the pact with Germany because we need to secure at least one border. That same day, the news is made public. Mussolini and Ciano are shocked, like the whole world, by the agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union. They are shocked but also admiring. These Germans are strong. The diary of Ciano. There is no doubt that the Germans have made a masterstroke. The European situation is in turmoil. Then Ciano makes a shrewd observation. England, and even more so France, are full of communists. How will they deal with all the communists they have at home to wage war against Germany, which is suddenly a friend of the Soviet Union? And then there is Ciano's conclusion, which I quote because it is emblematic of the language and moral level of the regime. Ciano concludes in his diary, it is advisable to wait, and, if possible, to be ready to do our part of the spoils as well. On Tuesday, August 22nd, Hitler summons the generals and gives the final orders for the war. He says that the time is right. It's like in 1914, remember? We have to make the most of this moment now. But the interesting thing is that Hitler is not referring to the preparation of the armies. No, Hitler has something else in mind. This is a famous speech by Hitler to his generals on August 22nd. Hitler says that we must go to war as soon as possible, while I am still here, because there will never be another leader in Germany with my power and my following. But I can be taken out at any moment by a traitor or an idiot. And the political culture of Hitler, which is entirely linked to political terrorism and political assassination. It's normal, it can happen, so as long as they haven't killed me yet, let's go ahead with this war. And then the other thing Hitler says is, as long as Mussolini is there, because as long as Mussolini is there, we can trust Italy. He is the only man with steady nerves in Italy when he is no longer there. He still deludes himself and trusts, because Mussolini at that precise moment has already decided to withdraw, but Hitler still deludes himself about his old friend. On Wednesday, August 23rd, the agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union is announced in the world press, Corriere della Sera. The German-Soviet agreement, the grand political success of the Axis, has shattered the murky maneuver of the democratic encirclers. Astonishment and bewilderment in the anti-totalitarian countries. Anti-totalitarian is an ugly word, of course. We are totalitarian. It was Mussolini who invented the concept of being a totalitarian country. Those other softies from France, they are anti-totalitarian. Poland is still the Corriere della Sera of August 23rd. Poland will have to seek its salvation by negotiating quickly with Germany. Poland is starting to give in, thinking that perhaps an agreement with the Soviet Union, even with the devil, could be made, but it is too late. On that August 23rd, Ribbentrop flies to Moscow and signs the Non-Aggression Pact, which is made public. And he also signs the secret protocol, which is not made public, obviously, in which Germany and the Soviet Union agree to divide Poland. Hitler receives the English ambassador that day, because the only concern he has left is, but we are trying to keep England out anyway. Hitler receives the English ambassador and speaks to him about the horrors that the Poles are committing against the German minority in Poland. Here is a small detail I could have suppressed, like many others, but even tonight I did not have the courage to suppress details. I will have to be brief because I am wasting too much time, but anyway, Hitler is a morbid conversation, this one with the English ambassador, about the horrors that the Poles are committing against the Germans. Hitler tells him, I have also come across many cases where Germans have been castrated by the Poles. The English ambassador in his report to London says, by pure chance, I was aware of one of these cases, of a case. The German in question, was a sexual maniac who was treated as he deserved. Mr. Hitler replied to me that he knew of 6 cases, not just one, and they continue like this. Hitler also tells him, this thing with Poland is the last. I am an artist, not a warrior. If I settle this matter with Poland, I will withdraw from politics and dedicate myself to art. The ambassador reports to London. Friday, August 25th. Hitler orders the attack for tomorrow. Then he receives a letter from Mussolini in which Mussolini tells him the truth for the first time. Italy is not ready to go to war. But he does not have the courage to tell him everything. So Mussolini tells Hitler, look, right now we cannot go to war. We would need large supplies of raw materials. If Germany can guarantee it, Hitler will be disappointed, but he will go along with it. He decides to postpone the attack on Poland by a few days. In the meantime, he asks Mussolini, what exactly raw materials do you need? Saturday, August 26th. Mussolini and the chiefs of staff of the Italian armed forces meet at Palazzo Venezia to draft the list of raw materials to request from Germany. The generals have been fed information by Ciano. In making this list, there is no criminal optimism. That is, you understand, go in hard. They make the list. I'll read it to you. 6 million tons of coal. To put it in perspective, that's the Italian production for 2 years. 2 million tons of steel. Italy's production for 1 year. 7 million tons of mineral oils. 1 million tons of timber. and then copper, sodium nitrate, potassium salts, rubber, toluene, turpentine, lead, tin, nickel, molybdenum, tungsten, titanium, 20 tons of zirconium. The list has gone down in history as the molybdenum list. They send it to the Italian ambassador in Berlin, in Tolico. The ambassador in Tolico takes it to Ribbentrop. Ribbentrop looks at the list and says, "But when do you need all this stuff?" It's a drama because they didn't tell Tolico anything. He has no instructions, but he understands the situation, so he improvises right away. It has been calculated that it would take 17,000 trains to send all that stuff to Italy. Ribbentrop goes to Hitler, and they finally understand. They realize that Italy is not on board. It will stay out, and that's fine. Patience. Hitler writes to Mussolini and tells him, "It's fine. Even if Italy cannot go to war, we will do it alone. We just need Italy, not to let it be known that it will stay out. If you don't flaunt it too much, it already helps us." And then Hitler says another thing, a small thing, but indicative of the future. He says, "You could help us by sending Italian workers to Germany." And here, in this way, begins what will later be a long story. It clearly shows how things change. The Germans suddenly open their eyes. One cannot count on military aid from Italy, but one can count on the workers. This is where the story begins of the millions of Italians who will first be convinced and then forced to go work in Germany. On Sunday, August 27th, rationing is introduced in Germany, along with a food ration card. On Monday, August 28th, England and France still think that perhaps they could convince the Poles to negotiate, and insist with the Polish government, "Go and ask the Germans exactly what they want, and let's see about discussing it." On Tuesday, August 29th, a ban on private car circulation comes into effect in Italy. There is austerity in restaurants. Menus can include only one dish, either meat or fish, but only one. The English ambassador goes to Hitler to see if it is still possible to negotiate at the last moment. The English ambassador writes to London that Hitler was not pleasant this evening. It was an interview, a stormy conversation. He kept saying that he desires England's friendship more than anything else in the world, but he cannot sacrifice Germany's vital interests. But Hitler said, "Anyway, if you guarantee me that the Poles are really willing to negotiate, that's fine. They can send me an emissary from Berlin tomorrow with full powers, and we can still negotiate." Wednesday, August 30th. The World Cycling Championships are suspended in Italy, in Varese. The ban on selling coffee to the public, even in bars, is lifted. Drinking from a cup is prohibited. All coffee is reserved for the armed forces. In France, train services are suspended. They evacuate the Vincennes Zoo to save the animals. In all the capitals, they begin to build air raid shelters and distribute gas masks to the population, as they were sure that the war would start with tremendous aerial bombings on the cities using choking gas. On that day, Wednesday, August 30th, the English Foreign Minister, Lord Halifax, writes to the English ambassador in Berlin that your claims are understandable. On that day, August 30th, Lord Halifax writes to the English ambassador in Berlin, add the English ambassador in Berlin. He says that the Germans want a Polish plenipotentiary in Berlin today, but it is unreasonable. They must understand that too. The English ambassador responds to him, "I made the same observation to Mr. Hitler last night. He replied that one can fly from Warsaw to Berlin in an hour and a half." At this point, the English, desperate to avoid war, begin to put heavy pressure on the Polish government. "You must not provoke the Germans. Enough with these Polish newspapers that write articles against Germany. Enough with the anti-German campaign. Send a plenipotentiary to Berlin immediately to discuss." The English ambassador returns to Ribbentrop and tells him that we are doing everything possible. We are trying to advise the Polish government to make peace, to reach an agreement. Ribbentrop responds to the English ambassador, It seems to me that the advice from the English has had damn little effect so far. The English ambassador responds to him and reports it to London. I replied that I was astonished to hear such language from a foreign minister. This point is a new comedy, though somewhat a dark comedy, in the German style. Ribbentrop tells him, yes, we had prepared the conditions for an agreement with Poland. These are them. And the English ambassador reports to London saying, at this point, Mr. von Ribbentrop started to read me this very long document, in German, very quickly, since I thought he would give it to me afterwards. I didn't pay much attention to listening. When he finished, I asked him about the conditions for Poland to make the agreement. Ribbentrop told me, oh no, it is too late. The Polish plenipotentiary should have arrived yesterday. The English ambassador says to him, but couldn't you deliver it to the Polish ambassador in Berlin? Ribbentrop replies, never, we will never summon him. The English ambassador says to him, but what if he asks to be summoned? Ribbentrop replies, well, in that case we could also see. The English ambassador continues, perhaps he has realized that they are pulling his leg, because he writes to London that evening. It is August 30th. It is almost over. The English ambassador in Berlin writes to London that evening, saying that this conversation with Mr. von Ribbentrop was extremely unpleasant. Throughout the evening, Mr. von Ribbentrop mimicked Mr. Hitler at his worst. On August 31st, the English tell the Poles to send a plenipotentiary to Berlin, or at least to send their ambassador, to knock and ask for the conditions for negotiation. The Poles respond that they will not send the ambassador, as it would be too humiliating. At 12:40 on August 31st, Mr. Hitler signs the order for the attack for the following morning. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the Poles reconsider, and without informing the English. They order the Polish ambassador in Berlin, Lipski, to go to Ribbentrop and ask what the conditions for negotiation are. Lipski goes to Ribbentrop. They ask him, but do you have plenipotentiary powers? No, I do not. Then no, we have nothing to say to each other, and they send him away. That evening, there is the famous Gleiwitz incident. The Gleiwitz incident is a curious and interesting event, especially for this reason. After all that I have told you, a person today would not believe that the Germans needed a pretext to declare war on Poland. Instead, they want a pretext. And the German secret services, under the command of Heydrich, have already prepared the pretext. Heydrich, you know, Reinhard Heydrich, a big shot in the SS, head of the security services, who will later be killed, executed 4 years later by Czechoslovak partisans in Prague. Heydrich has prepared a commando for 2 weeks in Gleiwitz, which is a German radio station near the Polish border. 12 men from the German intelligence services are waiting in Polish uniforms and documents, ready to spring into action as soon as the right moment arrives. The morning of August 31st is the right moment. Heydrich sends the password to the commando. The grandmother is dead. The commando springs into action in Polish uniform in German territory, attacking the Gleiwitz radio station. They shoot, seize the radio, and broadcast a rambling communique, as was said in our time during the Eber, in Polish, and then leave behind a dead man in Polish uniform. So there was the Polish aggression in German territory. The Germans have the right to invade Poland and begin a few hours later, at dawn, on September 1st. But in the meantime, during the night, Lord Halifax, the English foreign minister, who still hopes that the Germans are sincere and that a negotiation with the Poles can really be opened, is worried because these foolish Poles do not want to send the ambassador. He does not know that the Polish ambassador had already gone the day before and was thrown out. Lord Halifax, still in the night of September 1st, sends to his ambassador in Berlin and Warsaw perhaps the most pointless telegram that a British government has ever sent. And he says, but I don't see why the Polish government does not want to make difficulties. Its ambassador, the Polish ambassador, should accept this document from the Germans. A refusal on their part would be seriously misunderstood by public opinion. Her Majesty's government is ready to do everything to assist in a mediation. And to the ambassador in Warsaw, he says, tell the Polish government that their ambassador must go to Ribbentrop immediately to save the peace. That evening, the English ambassador in Warsaw responds to Lord Halifax. Your telegram was deciphered at 4 o'clock this morning. Mr. Lipski, the Polish ambassador, was already at the German foreign minister's office at 6:30 yesterday in Berlin. In light of this fact, which was followed by the German invasion of Poland this morning at dawn, it is clearly pointless for me to carry out your instructions. It will be another 2 days before England and France decide to declare war on the Germans in the foolish and naive hope and in good faith that this catastrophe can still be avoided. Meanwhile, in Italy, Mussolini is calm. Hitler has accepted that we stay out, and so we are waiting, as Ciano says, to see if we can also take our share of the spoils. Naturally, however, the Italian press does not say this in their reports. The Italian press must say something else, so I conclude with the Corriere della Sera from September 1st. Mr. Hitler's proposals for Danzig, loyal, reasonable, and highly feasible, were foolishly dismissed by Warsaw and London. England and its allies, pinned down by their tremendous responsibilities. The conscious wisdom and German moderation in the face of the blind intransigence of the other parties in conflict. And these are the newspapers that our fathers read in this happy country of ours in 1939. Thank you.